All right, parents of preschoolers, let's talk. Life is hard. We know this. You're forced to focus all of the time. You've lost your rights to privacy. No one can describe your home as tranquil anymore, right? Not too long ago, I was in a restaurant, and a kid started going nuts. Luckily, it was not my child. But you could easily see just by looking around the room who had preschoolers in their home and who did not. Because every family that had a preschooler in their home, whether that child was in the room or not, when that other kid is going nuts, they didn't miss a beat. They just kept eating, kept their conversation going. They learned the power of being able to zone some things out. And you could see everybody who didn't have children like this immediately concerned, like, what is happening? Like, is there an emergency on our hands? And you could just easily see, like, who has it, who doesn't? And this is kind of a big thing for me and my family, because our youngest, Timothy, who is 2 years old, is transitioning out of naps. And this is a big deal. It's not that he wouldn't benefit from a nap. Oh, he definitely would. The problem is, if he sleeps great in the afternoon, he does not sleep great at night. And I hate to be a little bit selfish, but I think we value our night sleep a little bit more than our afternoon sleep in our house. And so there's this weird phenomenon that happens around 3 p.m. He starts going feral. I'm not sure if you guys have experienced this, where it's like completely unpredictable. You're like, is there a wild animal loose in the house? I don't know. It might just be Timothy, like crawling through the cabinets, like, just going into the refrigerator all the time. He's completely unpredictable. And, there's a lot of things that are hard about this season. I talk to friends who do not have little kids, and they ask me if I've seen something in sports or pop culture. It doesn't matter what it is. And I'm always having to say, no, I haven't heard of this. Did they cover it in an episode of Bluey? Because if they did, maybe I know about this. But if they didn't, then I'm kind of clueless. But I'm not saying all this to say, woe is me. And the reason why I say that is because there's a bright side to parenting children of this age. I look at friends who have older children, like junior high, high school, and I think they have it way worse than I do. Because when they have to get onto their kids, they have to use love and logic, and they have to try and make it make sense and rationalize with their kids. Do you know what I do if I have a child who is not behaving themselves? I pick them right up. I throw them over my shoulder like a bag of onions at Costco, and I take them wherever I want them to go. Oh, you don't want to go to bed? I don't care. Let's go. You just throw them in their room and lock the door. I'm kidding. I don't lock the door. It's like, hey, you don't want to get in the car? Well, too bad. Dad said we have to. And you just go and you set them right down. I love that ability to just kind of enforce my will on my kids whenever I need to. And the reason I say this is because whether you recognize it or not, this is the power dynamic that we have with God, okay? Now, it's not necessarily, quite that, because frankly, God has a lot more power to exert his will over us than we recognize. In fact, one of my favorite verses to even illustrate this is Psalm 135:6 that says, "Whatever the Lord pleases, he does." I mean, that's quite the power. I think we all know some people who think that rules are just suggestions, and they just kind of, we're not allowed to eat here? Well, that doesn't really apply to me. And they're like, whatever I please, I'll do. But there's limits to that, right? Because somebody with a little bit more authority, a little bit more power comes in and puts them in check. Now, God, on the other hand, that is not the case. Whatever he pleases, he does. See, he lives from a position of complete and utter control in every aspect of the universe. And I know there's kind of this weird dance that we have because we do have some free will in some cases, right? There's passages throughout the Bible, that implore us, hey, you need to make a choice, that you need to either choose God or not. You need to choose who are you going to serve. You need to choose life over death. You need to choose to respect God over acting like he's not there. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, whatever the Lord pleases, he does. Now, as we get into Daniel chapter 4 today, this dynamic is on full display. See, this year we've been working our way through the book of Daniel in our series, Babylon, My Home, and we're going to spend the next 3 weeks in Daniel chapter 4 alone, because it is an interesting passage that really illustrates God's full control of creation against specifically our human pride and arrogance. So Daniel chapter 4, starting in verse 1, starts off this way. It says, King Nebuchadnezzar sent this message to the people of every race and nation and language throughout the world. So just quick time out. What we're about to read is not Daniel's words recorded in his book. We're about to read something that was penned by Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, and this is what he says. Peace and prosperity to you. I want you all to know about the miraculous signs and wonders the Most High God has performed for me. How great are his signs, how powerful his wonders. His kingdom will last forever, his rule through all generations. If you've been around church for a while and you've ever read through the Bible, you would look at this and say, wow, this could have just been lifted straight from the Psalms. Like this is like biblical, poetic language about how great God is. But like I said, we're not reading this from Daniel's perspective. We're not reading it from David's perspective, who wrote most of the Psalms. If you're tracking with me over the course of this series, this is from the same evil pagan Nebuchadnezzar who destroyed Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. And also, to be very clear, and this is kind of an important detail, I don't believe that what we're reading is evidence of Nebuchadnezzar converting from being a pagan to being a God follower. This is on the other end of a time where God really got his attention and humbled him and did something incredible in his life, and not the good kind of incredible. And the funny thing is, like, for those who would have been receiving this message from Nebuchadnezzar on this day, right? So Nebuchadnezzar says, write this down, send it into the entire world. If they've been paying attention, then they get this message from the emperor, from King Nebuchadnezzar, and their first reaction is probably, where's this dude been? He has been MIA for the last 7 years, and that is what chapter 4 is all about. See, what happens is Nebuchadnezzar has a dream that is given to him from God. Daniel is going to interpret that dream and is going to warn him that unless you make some changes, some terrible things are going to happen. And 1 year after this dream, Nebuchadnezzar is going to go full werewolf, or rather more like were-cow. Like literally, like his hair starts growing out, he starts going into fields grazing, he loses his ability to act like a human and has the brain of a beast for 7 full years. And here's how the story starts. Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful and influential man on the planet, once again has a dream. If you've been with us throughout the series, you would say, is this a rerun? Because this feels very similar to a sermon we had a couple weeks ago. And in chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar had a very disturbing dream. But here we are 2 chapters later, and dude is still not getting a good night's sleep, all right? Like that seems to be what's happening. He has a dream that bothers him a lot. And it's a dream that I'm sure would bother you too, because it was all about trees. And then there's not, like, I would just be so bored when I wake up. No, that's not the reason why. But what's incredible is he has this dream and things start to get bothersome to him. So what he does is he decides, like, I need to bring in the experts. So in verse 4 of Daniel chapter 4, it says, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was living in my palace in comfort and prosperity. But one night I had a dream that frightened me. I saw visions that terrified me as I lay in my bed. So I issued an order calling in all the wise men of Babylon so they could tell me what my dream meant. And when all the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and fortune tellers came in, I told them the dream. In chapter 2, he says, you need to tell me what I dreamed. In this chapter, he's like, I'm just going straight for it. Here's everything that I had, and here is what they say. They could not tell him what it meant. And at last Daniel came in before me, and I told him the dream. He was named Belteshazzar, after my God, and the spirit of the holy gods in him. So this is what I mean when I say I don't believe this is a conversion story. His allegiance is still to another God. But everything is going right in his life until he has this bad dream. And something as small as a bad night's sleep and a disturbing dream throws his life upside down. But before we get into a little bit of the content of the dream and some of those things that we can pull from that, I just want to start with this principle, all right? Because we saw this happen in chapter 2, and now we're seeing this happen in chapter 4 again. His first thing that he does is he brings in his astrologers, his enchanters, his fortune tellers. He's like, tell me what I dreamed. And once again, I just want to highlight this for us because we miss this so often. The quality of your counsel is the quality of your counsel. I know there's a homonym there, so it might be a little bit, so you might have to read that twice to really understand it. The quality of the advice that you receive is dependent on the quality of the person who is giving it to you, right? I don't know what their discernment qualities were. I don't know who they were, but everything about them that we see just described in here is these are people who do not take their cues from the Most High. They take their cues from their own Babylonian pagan gods, that they go into these states of trying to tap into the spirit world and try and bring in all of this wisdom and knowledge, but not the kind of knowledge and wisdom that enriches your life, the kind that leads you further away from God. In fact, Proverbs 13:20 would say this, to try and tie it back to where we live. Walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and you get in trouble. And so the reason I say this is this is kind of bonus content for today. Some of you get advice and counsel from the least qualified people on the planet, right? You're like, man, I got questions about my finances. And you go to people who are broke and bad with money and say, what should I do? Some of you, you're like, man, I don't know what to do about my marriage. And so you go to people who are in terrible marriages and you say, man, what do you think I should do? Some of you go for health tips from people who have bad health and make bad health decisions. Here's just kind of the principle that I want us to kind of, ruminate on. Just think about this. There are some people that you should be friends with. Okay, you should be friends with. You should love them. You should be kind to them. You should be generous to them. You should call them on their birthday, right? You should do those things. But you should not take advice from them. You just need to try and understand, there are some people that you should bring into your inner circle that feeds into you and give you advice and show you how to live. And then there are some people you just need to be friends with. And if you're wondering, hey, how do I know the difference? Look at what they're doing and the outcomes in their life. Once again, let's just take the marriage one for a second. If you're in a bad relationship, before you take the advice of somebody, just kind of look are they in a good marriage or are they in a bad marriage? Because if they're in a good marriage, there's probably some inputs that are really healthy and quality and they're really, really good. And if they're in a bad marriage, maybe there are some things that they are doing that are making that a bad marriage. So think about, before you actually take their advice, who is the person I'm getting this counsel from? The quality of your counsel determines the quality of your counsel. All right, but like I said, that's bonus content. Let's get back in. It says in verse 9, so I said to him, this is Nebuchadnezzar to Daniel, Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and that no mystery is too great for you to solve. Now tell me what my dream means. While I was lying in my bed, this is what I dreamed. I saw a large tree in the middle of the earth. The tree grew very tall and strong, reaching high to the heavens for all the world to see. It had fresh green leaves, and it was loaded with fruit for all to eat. Wild animals lived in its shades, and birds nested in its branches. All the world was fed from this tree. Now, we're going to dive more into some of the particulars next week, but this tree is a metaphor for Nebuchadnezzar. There was nothing like it on the planet. The entire world was benefiting from the tree. They were benefiting from Nebuchadnezzar. The leaves are green, the fruit is plentiful, that there's an entire ecosystem that rests around it. Birds and wild animals are finding shelter in the tree. And if the tree is destroyed, the entire world will feel it. Now, similarly for Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar, he was the source and the sustenance of much of the world. But that's not the part that's unsettling to him. It starts getting unsettling in verse 13 when it says, "Then as I lay there dreaming, I saw a messenger, a holy one, coming down from heaven. The messenger shouted, 'Cut down the tree and lop off its branches. Shake off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Chase the wild animals from its shade and the birds from its branches, but leave the stump and the roots in the ground, bound with a band of iron and bronze and surrounded by tender grass. Now let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the wild animals among the plants of the field.'" Verse 16, "For 7 periods of time, let him have the mind of a wild animal instead of the mind of a human." I am so glad that dreams in the Bible are as weird as my dreams, right? Like I'm just so grateful for this. And the reason I say that, I'd always ask my dad growing up, "Hey, like, what did you dream about?" And he'd always have answers like brushing my teeth. And it's like, brushing your teeth? Who dreams about brushing their teeth? Like, my dreams are things like I'm in school, but it's not actually my school, but I know it's my school, and I am like late on a paper, right? Like, those are the kind of dreams that I have. But for Nebuchadnezzar, he's having a weird dream just like most of the rest of us. And for his dream, the tree is providing shelter and food, but for 7 periods of time, it's going to be lopped off. And in the biblical account, whenever you see the number 7, kind of take note of it. Because more often than not, 7 represents completeness. That what was being indicated is that he was about to experience 7 years of madness. And the better way to understand this is not just a period of time, but he's going to be completely, totally, and utterly humbled. And so I'm not really sure why he needed necessarily an interpreter, because a lot of it feels like it's pretty clear, or maybe he's just hoping that something would be different in this. But I think the reason why he was so bothered by the dream, and we'll get into his response a little bit later next week when we go into the second part of chapter 4, but he recognizes something bad is about to happen, and something bad is about to happen to me. And a principle that we all have to understand: the tree is no match for the axe. Now, the tree is much larger than the axe. The tree, oh my goodness, like it has an whole ecosystem around it. But just this one tool can take the tree down. Now, this is actually probably the greater theme for the entire chapter. This is the power dynamic that's alluded to earlier. The tree in all of its greatness and all of its prestige can easily be destroyed by the swing of an axe. See, Nebuchadnezzar, he would not have attributed the greatness of the Babylonian Empire to God. In fact, if you actually put him on the witness stand, he probably would say, like, "Hey, I owe this all to my gods. I owe it all to the God that I worship," right? Like, Marduk and Nego and like all of the rest of the Babylonian gods that were so prominent in Babylon. But at the end of the day, and I really think that the biblical account shows this, and I think his actions show this, and I think human nature shows this, he still really believed the greatness of Babylon came back to one person, him. In fact, I believe that almost every leader at that kind of level has some form of arrogance. And so for us, even to this day, I think that there are a couple things that can be true. You can work really, really hard. You can make wise decisions. You can pick yourself up. You can apply yourself to work. And I think that it's honorable, it's admirable, and I think that's true, that there is an element of effort that's required to find success. But the second thing is also of note. All blessings ultimately come from God. And to deny God's role in your blessing is to deny God. And one thing that we have to understand as we read through an account like this in Daniel chapter 4 is you cannot ignore the role that God has played to put you where you are. Like, just go through these questions and just kind of just ask yourself, man, what role did I have in this Did you choose your parents? No, you didn't choose your parents, but do your parents have a major impact on who you become as an adult? Absolutely. Did you choose the nation that you grew up in? No, you didn't. And over again, it's shown that like some nations allow for upward mobility, some nations do not. Do you choose the time frame in which you can start your career and use the skill set that might be just embedded inside of you? Like, I think about this, maybe I'm the only one. What happens if you're 7 feet tall in the year 1885? What do? Maybe you join the circus, right? Like that's about as good as it's gonna get because you're way too tall for every doorway you're gonna walk into. They don't make clothes for you. Life is very, very inconvenient to be 7 foot tall in 1885. To be 7 foot tall in 2024, you have a 1 in 7 chance of playing in the NBA. That's a very real stat, 1 in 7. That just shows you how few 7-footers are on this planet. And so what I'm saying is, did they choose to be born in an age where that would be a very marketable attribute? No. And you take that to yourself, that there's a million, we'll call them coincidences, but it's ultimately God positioning you and planning for you and to be at the place that you're at the specific time that you're at. And so is there some effort on your part to accomplish the things that you have in this life? Yes. You've applied yourself, you've worked hard, you have stewarded well what God has ultimately given you, but you cannot deny God's role and influence on who you are. And to deny God's hand is to deny God. And let me remind you, the tree is no match for the axe. As quickly as God can grow it, he can take it down. All right, and here's how our section concludes this morning. It says in Daniel 4:17, "For this has been decreed by the messengers, it is commanded by the holy ones, so that everyone may know that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of the world. He gives them to anyone he chooses, even the lowliest of people." This is the heavenly messenger confirming and clearing up for us what this is all about. God is highlighting his role in whatever I please, I will do. Nebuchadnezzar, you think you're great. You have built the city as a monument to yourself. You literally built a monument to yourself that we talked about last week. You think that there's something inside of you that has forced my hand to put you in a position of influence and leadership and grandeur. But that's not the case. I am the Lord Most High. I do whatever I please. I rule over all the kingdoms of the world. I will give them to anyone that I choose, even to the lowliest of people. Here's the thing. God is not insecure about his position in the universe. Because you're like, oh man, is he threatened by Nebuchadnezzar and his greatness? No. God is not insecure about his position in the universe. His reminders are not out of pride, but out of love and truth. So what he's about to do to Nebuchadnezzar, that we will look at deeper in the next couple of weeks, it is unsettling, it is scary, but ultimately it's motivated out of a place of, I love you enough, I have good things in store for you enough that I want to remind you what's at stake here. See, God is going to mandate praise, and he will get praise no matter what. His glory cannot be denied. And if Nebuchadnezzar will not give him the credit for it, he is going to take it. But let's just go back for a second to like what this is doing to Nebuchadnezzar, because like I said, it is unsettling and it is scary to him. And he says this. He's like, I'm bothered. And the content is also scary. And Daniel's going to make it very clear for him. Yeah, it's as bad as you think it is, and maybe even worse in some other areas. You know, and it's so funny because it's like, hey, Daniel, I need you to interpret this for me. What does it mean when it says, let him have the mind of a wild animal instead of the mind of a human? And Daniel's going to be like, it means that. That's literally what it means. But like I said, God's motivation is not just to generate fear, but to generate fear so that it leads to change. He's using fear to get him to move. And the truth is, that's how you get motivated as well. You are probably far more motivated by pain than you are by pleasure. And I hate this. I hate this for myself, and I hate this for you as well. That it's usually not until you start having health challenges that you say, I need to start eating better. It's not until you start getting cavities that you say, I should probably pull the floss out. Sometimes it's when your kid goes off the deep end that you say, I need to get more involved in their life. Right? And the reason why is because we're more motivated in times of trouble than we are in times of plenty. And God often speaks to us loudest in seasons of tension, transition, and trouble. And because this is true, I want to challenge you, don't despise these seasons. Except by their nature, that's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to despise them. Like I said, I wish I could say that, the best way to get close to God is to get into a good season. False. Usually great times, easy times, they usually create hard hearts. Why? Because you don't think you need God. You don't feel like you really want to desire Him. This is one of the reasons why in the Gospels, Jesus would say, that's why it's so hard for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. It's not that God is biased against the rich people. It's that the rich people are often like, well, why do I need God? I've done everything on my own this far. I've pulled myself up. I've put myself in a position of power that I am great. And what happens is we immediately start to close off our heart to God. And He's saying, no, I love you so much that if I give you a hard time, it's not because I'm trying to be punitive. It's because I'm trying to get your attention. It's the alarm clock metaphor. Some of you, all you need is a gentle whisper to wake you up in the mornings. And some of you have an alarm setting on your phone with 20 different alarms all spaced 3 minutes apart, right? And here's what's funny is you guys always marry each other. One person just hops right up, the other one's I'm never waking up under any circumstances at all. I used to be that way. In fact, I remember one time in college, I woke up to a security guard standing over my bed saying, you have to leave. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, you have to leave. I'm like, why would I have to leave? It's the fire alarm's been going off for the last 20 minutes. And I just slept through the whole thing. I get that. But some of you need God to give you that fire alarm to start pushing you to move and do something different. It's not that God is man, I'm going to be so mean to Nebuchadnezzar because he has it coming. It's, I am going to do something to get his attention and to prove the Most High rules over the kingdoms of this world. And he gives them to anyone that he chooses. All right, so what do we do with all of this? Well, I have 4 questions for you to consider. Here's the first one. Who should you kick out of the group chat? Right? It's not that you're going to delete them from your contacts, but you're not going to ask them for advice any longer. Sometimes it's people that you need to cut out are people you don't even know on a personal level. Your algorithm on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube is pushing people into your feed that are not enriching your life. They're pushing you to think about some things differently and to move away from the truth that you are positive and confident that you know. And you need to say, you know what? I need to get them out of my life. Some of you need to start blocking some people. You need to start changing the algorithm. You need to delete the app from your phone. There are some people that you are going to for advice. There's other people who are giving you advice and they don't even realize it. But you have to ask yourself the question, who do I need to kick out of the group chat? The quality of your counsel determines the quality of your counsel. So who do you need to push out? Here's the second question you need to ask yourself. Where is your pride eclipsing the work of God? Don't believe for a minute that you are completely and 100% self-made. You needed God to be where you are. Now, God may have used you to do more, but if you're so convinced of your greatness, you will miss it. Where is your pride eclipsing the work of God? Here's the third question. What are you pretending not to know? And this is a part that you might have missed it the first time through. But God warns Nebuchadnezzar, and he gives him 12 months to make a change. The dream is unsettling, yes, but the dream ends up going away. It gets interpreted, and it's not bothering him like it was. But the promise is still there. I mean, he has this fear that I'm going to be free-ranging throughout the fields. He has this fear that the tree is going to get lopped off. But it's not an immediate consequence. And so apparently he just kind of silences that warning and just kind of lets it go. And some of you are pretending not to know about where the warning that you have received is actually leading you. You're dating the wrong person. You know it, but you're pretending like you don't. You have a secret habit that you turn to for comfort, and you know that it's controlling you, and you know that it's bad, but it hasn't ruined anything yet, and you're like, I can manage it. You're pretending not to know it's a problem. Some of you are like, oh, it's just social drinking. And the reality is it's not, and it's catching up to you, and it's going to eventually ruin you, and you know this. And you're like, oh, but I'm going to pretend like it's not a problem. Some of you, your income can't keep up with your spending, and you're very much aware of this, but you can still kind of make the payments, so it's okay, right? Some of you, you have gossip in your life, and you have slander and complaining, and it is ruining your relationships, and you're pretending like it's not a problem. And I'm asking you, like, what are you pretending not to know is true in your life? You have problems that if you don't get them under control, they will destroy you. And God has given you maybe like even a glimpse of like how this could be a problem, but because it doesn't feel immediate, you're like, I'm just going to silence this, and you shouldn't. All right, now some of us, we didn't heed the warnings, and life got hard, and we're thinking, man, I wish that somebody would have told me this, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. And you feel like you're living on the other side of a mistake, and you're in the middle of the wreckage. And to you, I'm going to remind you, if you're not dead, you're not done, right? Now, why? Well, God isn't done with you yet. Just look at this detail again from Daniel chapter 4. All right, this is verse 15. The messenger that comes down from heaven says to Nebuchadnezzar in the dream, but leave the stump and the roots in the ground. And so the final question I just want you to ask yourself is, where did God leave the stump in your life? See, you cannot control the things that happened to you that are gone forever. But what are the things that can grow back? So yes, your marriage is destroyed. That's never coming back together. She has moved on. He has moved on. Like it's over, right? That's done. But where did God leave the stump for something to grow back? Your relationship with your kids. Yeah, mom and dad might be at odds, but there's still a chance that that relationship can grow back. Oh, yes, you lost your job. It was very, very hard, but you're still good with people. You still picked up some skills along the way. God can still allow something to grow from that. Because if you're not dead, you're not done. What part of your life is now available for God to redeem and grow back? We're going to talk about this more in 2 weeks, but God is a comeback God. The empty grave means that there is no situation that is too helpless for God to do something incredible inside of you. And so, as we consider these questions of who do you need to kick out of the group chat, where is your pride eclipsing the work of God? What are you pretending not to know? And where did God leave the stump? My hope is that as we go through this passage together, and even as we contemplate it throughout the week, we start to see that there are times when God gives us a glimpse of our future, or maybe He disciplines us to a degree. And I'm hoping that in those seasons, we don't see that as a mean and angry God who is just trying to whack-a-mole with your life. But rather, this is a loving God who is going to intercede and insert Himself into your life to get your attention, to push you to change. And if we will catch this sooner rather than later, we'll see that God can redeem it and He can grow something incredible out of it. But it's not going to happen if we defiantly and arrogantly and pridefully keep ourselves at the center of the story. So let's pray. God, thank you for warnings like this. Thank you for stories like this that remind us that you are ultimately the God that does whatever you please. God, I'm praying that this would not be disconcerting. I'm praying that this wouldn't be hard to hear, but rather, God, that this would be comforting and a reminder that you love us enough to insert yourself where you need to. God, I'm praying for those who need to say yes to you for the very first time. That, God, that they would be reminded today, yes, you've given me some choices, God, but ultimately you're the one who's at the center of it all. And so, God, I'm praying that I would get out of the center, that you would sit on the throne. That, God, if that means that you need to forgive me of my sins and take full control of my life, please forgive me of my sins and take full control of my life. God, become the Lord and Savior. Be the person who's in control. That, God, you have the rightful place once again on the throne. God, I pray for those who are keeping things secret and hidden right now and are pretending like they don't know this is a problem. That, God, that they would bring it to the light so that it could be exposed and that ultimately it could be cleaned and can start to produce something good. And God, I'm also praying that you would show us where you left the roots and the stump. The things that we thought were dead and gone, that, God, you want to grow back and you want to restore and you want to redeem. I'm praying that you would bring those to our mind and that you would convict them through your Holy Spirit in our hearts so that we can live the way that you ask us to live and that we can worship who you've asked us to worship, you and you alone. I pray this all in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.